Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And on the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You can find him on many blogs and many podcasts all over the internet, including through Cold Omaha. Please welcome useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, it's been a long day. It's been a long night.
That's what it felt like.
We've
been setting up the podcast.
Yeah, we've been trying to record for a while, but you can only record a podcast around incredibly loud thunderclaps for so long before you go, yeah, we should probably wait until this storm passes. This has been an ugly one tonight. Just one of those like full building shake sort of thing. So this is the dark and stormy night edition of the podcast, where we will relive the horror that was all of the penalty flags from the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah, pretty appropriate.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was a bit like a Jason movie where it just kept coming back. You go, no, we can't possibly get another penalty. We're lining up to block a kick. We'll be fine. Really? Another one? All right, I'll pay money for the sequel. It'll be fine. So, but before all that, before we get into the game, before we start talking about Sam Bradford and his potential bone bruise, just a quick note that we just wanted to mention that we are sponsored by you, the listener. We appreciate everything you guys have done through donations, through spreading the word on social media, from just listening to the show to even just telling a friend that, hey, listen to Norse Code. Demand excellence. Demand Norse Code. If you do hear value in what you're hearing right now, there's two ways you can support us. You can go to paypal.me/Norse Code and give a one-time donation there, or you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and be one of the fine, upstanding citizens who has gone out and donated money on a monthly plan there. You can donate anything from $1 to untold amounts of money. Most people choose Tree Fitty just to keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay, but do whatever you need to do. We appreciate it all the same. But guys, thank you so much. We are into the regular season now. You're getting 2 episodes from us a week. Plenty of guests, plenty of hosts. I'm saying plenty of hosts because we have 2 and we have Arif, so plenty of hosts. Just in case.
A smorgasbord of hosts.
A smorgasbord of 2 hosts. You will. You enjoy. I make for you. Come in. But yeah, thank you guys so much. If you do appreciate the show, you can also go to us on iTunes and just give us 5 stars. It really helps kind of drive us up the charts. So do whatever you got to do, but please keep spreading the word about Norse Code. Before we go any further into the show, just a couple quick notes. We do have 2 donations to go over real quick. We have a donation from Charles Harrison, who donates via PayPal. Again, thank you guys so much. I believe that was from the note on it anyway seems to imply this is from Hawaii. So thank you so much for that, Charles. Also, Matthew Beckendorf donates via Patreon. Again, thank you guys so much. We appreciate it so very much for you guys helping out. And we take this money, we go to London, we buy some new equipment on it. We try to keep the show moving and try to keep it as ad-free as possible. So the only ads you hear come from our lovely voices. So guys, thank you so much for donating. Thank you for supporting us. All of that aside, before we talk about the game, first, do we really have to talk about the game? If we don't cover it, did it really happen?
You know, that's a good point. I think existentially the game is in limbo until we start talking about it in more detail. And I don't know if we want to start talking about it in more detail then.
Aren't we all day-to-day? I feel like we're all day-to-day.
That's life, man.
That's deep. So, Sam Bradford did not start the game. He went out onto the field, made a couple of throws you would see, I don't know, at a Kennedy touch football game in a backyard a couple decades ago, and then decided that was it for him. His leg wasn't going to hold up. So instead, we had Case Keenum. Now, rumor has come out about Bradford's injury. initially they weren't sure if it
Couple
was
of rumors. Yeah.
rumors is the best term for it. Initially, there was some concern about the ACL because of all the surgeries, and the line that struck me was that there's so much scar tissue in there that they couldn't tell if it was torn or not because you couldn't tell on an MRI, which is always a good thing for you to find out about your quarterback. But can we talk a little bit about the potential bone bruise that they are that seems to be making the rounds on the rumor mill?
Yeah, so there seems to be three essential potential problems that could be impacting Sam Bradford, and they could all be occurring at once, which would obviously be the worst case scenario. But it seems like it's an either or sort of situation where it's only one of the three. And which one it is very important. So it could be just kind of the normal swelling that's associated with a really screwed up knee, like Sam Bradford's, and that would be sort of concurrent with the information that we have about how it was difficult to tell what was going on inside the MRI as a result of scar tissue. Now, I've heard from a couple of people that's actually fairly unlikely that doctors wouldn't be able to kind of see through all of the old scar tissue. I'm not a radiologist, obviously, so I don't know. But a lot of people with medical or pseudo-medical backgrounds are fairly skeptical of that account. I'm not sure. But there's just kind of the everyday swelling. That's kind of one diagnosis. Another potential issue could have been, and Zimmer mentioned this, without a high degree of certainty on Monday, that actually the issue could have been that his knee got twisted at some point during the Saints game. He felt something go, and he didn't think it was a huge problem. Feeling
dirty cheaters. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
It's always the Saints, man. They kill so many Vikings quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I find it also kind of suspicious that a guy who's had 2 ACL surgeries in his left knee felt something go in his left knee and was like, nah. No worries.
He turns into the dog in the firehouse this is fine.
So I guess that's one potential argument. And then that evidently would be, I guess, the knee twisting a little bit, and that's, I guess, sort of day-to-day. And then the other one, we initially heard this from Tom Pelissero, but I think it's a report that's been echoed by others, is that there's a bone bruise. And a bone bruise would take 4 to 6 weeks to heal. And so we've got 3 different potential diagnoses and 3 different, therefore, timelines. I think if it's just the swelling, it's probably already mostly taken care of. But if it's the knee being twisted, it could take a little bit longer. It could have already been taken care of, but it seems like on average that would take maybe a little bit longer. He still may be able to play against the Bucs next week. So, whatever. Maybe that resolves it. Maybe you have to wait a week or 2 longer than you would have wanted. And then the bone bruise, 4 to 6 weeks. And so that seems to be the sort of worst case scenario for given all the reports that we have. It's confusing, and what's really kind of frustrating to me is that I know Mike Zimmer's very reticent about talking about injuries, not just for advantage issues, and not just because they don't want their opponents to know sort of who's available and stuff like that. He genuinely just does not like talking about injuries. But I feel we know what the rumors are, and he can address at least some of these rumors. He can address this rumor about the bone bruise, for example, and maybe shut it down if it's not the case. You can address this discussion about the MRIs. I think he may have addressed that one, saying it wasn't true, but I don't think I got a strong feeling that was the case. I'll probably look it up after the show and feel like an idiot. But he can kind of deal with this cacophony of noise surrounding what's wrong with Sam Bradford's knee without having to say this is what's wrong with it, because I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't quite know what the prognosis is, but I think that he can probably address some of the contradictory other prognoses that exist out there.
We kind of had the same situation with, was it Sharif Floyd last year with his litany of potential issues with his knee. And in the end, it just turns out to be like nerve damage and is still trying to, get out and play. But didn't necessarily address it, just kept going, well, when he's ready to play, he'll play.
Yeah, I think some of that... so I still am upset with Zimmer for essentially calling Sharif Floyd lazy. I mean, he didn't use those words, but that's essentially what he was implying, that he was really upset with Floyd for not, I guess, like, toughing it out, and it turns out, it was, like, nerve damage, and, like, believe your players, dude. When he says he can't come back, he can't come back. Like, it's not his fault. And the nerve damage was, like, a result of, like, a nick during surgery. He strung along the media for a while. In that case, he also didn't know, and in this case, there was also, like, it was not quite the same because there weren't, like, alternate rumors to address. I was left with the impression that Sharif Floyd was going to be back, after a week, and he wasn't, and that was kind of confusing. It did get kind of upsetting when it became clear that Sharif Floyd wasn't going to come back very soon, that the Vikings didn't, and Mike Zimmer specifically, didn't seem to acknowledge that. But I think that one's a lot less frustrating than the Sam Bradford situation, where there's multiple rumors floating around, and they could interact or contradict some of the other rumors that are out there.
Well, I like to think that with the changing of the seasons, with the changing of the air pressure, I notice it in my knee after
storm's coming.
After shredding it a bit. That storm's coming, or it's starting to get a little colder out. It's gonna be winter soon. It's gonna be fall soon, then winter. I get the feeling that it's just one of those situations where his knee is just telling him that the seasons are changing. I mean, my knee gets weak when the weather is going to change like that. I can only imagine what it's like to have 2 ACL surgeries on the same knee and then deal with, clouds overhead moving fast. Like, it's probably a thing, and just got a little weak there and couldn't play in Philadelphia. Or sorry, in Pittsburgh. And who could blame him? Looking at that field, however, like, what are the 3 worst fields? If I was to say, what's the worst field in the NFL to play in, you would say?
FedEx, followed by Soldier, followed by the Coliseum.
Yep, probably Coliseum. And right in the top 5 would probably include Heinz Field.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it could have just been one of those, it's a bad situation, let's not make it worse. So, I mean, if it was like FedEx, I wouldn't have even had them go out for throws for practice. Like, you should stay out in the Reggie Bush zone and just hang out by the track.
Right.
It's like the second show I've had, like 2, that I've made fun of Reggie Bush for tearing his ACL or whatever on the track. But really, dude, how the hell does one do that? But in any case, it could just be as simple as that, and they were just trying to protect. But in any case, he is listed as day-to-day, which we all are, and we hope to have him back for the game against the Bucs, because the performance of Case Keenum was admirable at moments. He had moments.
Gutsy
for sure. He had moments, not for, any real length of time or any consistency, but gosh darn it, he had moments. And the thing that I would like to start off, as far as the game is concerned, is the sheer number of penalties that the Vikings as a squad absorbed. Because we had, 11 accepted and 14 times penalized?
Yeah, total. Right? Yeah, because 3 more were declined, yeah. So, one of those declined happened to occur on a big play as well. It's the Trae Waynes giving up 50-odd yards to Martavis Bryant. Just as an example.
Play, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was going to be declined. Or the free play was going to be declined. So, whatever. But, it was the sloppiest I think I've seen the Vikings play in the Mike Zimmer era. It was either in 2014 or 2015 or both. The Vikings were first or second in the league in fewest penalties committed. And so it's particularly frustrating because this is kind of like the standard we've gotten used to. I mean, I remember with Brad Childress and Leslie Frazier that the Vikings weren't nearly as disciplined about penalties, and some of those penalties you're okay taking, like, Everson Griffin offsides, that sort of thing. Like, that just comes with it. It's he's going to ride the line, and sometimes it's going to cause penalties, but most of the time it's going to give him enough of an advantage to create pressure or a sack. So you're okay with it. But other times you're just absolutely not. Terrence Newman's, defensive holding penalty, like, don't. Brian Robinson's penalty, obviously not okay with that. And most of the penalties in this game kind of fell into that category where it wasn't kind of a routine part of play that you're just kind of absorbing the risk of a penalty. It's just stupid. Don't do it. That fourth down penalty was bad. The special teams penalty was not explained properly on the broadcast. They indicated it was having too many people on one side of the line of scrimmage, which is a penalty, but it wasn't in this case because Eric Kendricks was off the line of scrimmage. It was because Nick Easton's shoulder was over the shoulder of the long snapper, and they fixed that on the next snap. So they look like identical snaps, but they're not. And so, that's a dumb penalty. Like, that's the first rule you need to know when you're playing the A gap of the field goal kicking formation. Don't line up over the long snapper. It's just basic stuff. So, there was a bunch of really dumb penalties that really impacted play in a big way.
So Case Keenum comes in, worked a little bit with the first team last week, and goes out and attempts to perform with a line that would not give him the time of day. There were moments where the offensive line wasn't terrible, but this was a big regression after the progress that we made last week.
Yeah, so the offensive line this week, according to Pro Football Focus, who a lot of people have been kind of upset with because Xavier Rhodes ranks pretty low for them right now, Pro Football Focus logged at least one pressure given up by every single offensive lineman, which is distinct from last week when there were only 3 pressures given up, each by one individual lineman. And in this case, you had like 4 pressures from Reef, 4 pressures from Easton, 1 pressure from Elfline, 2 pressures. It was really bad, and it's obviously it creates a huge disservice to Keenum, who exacerbates a lot of that pressure by kind of floating into it instead of stepping up into the pocket. He's not a very good quarterback. That's why he's a backup. But, you get the sense that if he had been given a clean pocket, he largely would have been fine. And I double-checked, this kind of intuition by looking at his numbers in this game versus pressure on looking at his numbers in his career, as far as I could tell, under pressure. And from what I could figure out, Case Keenum is actually kind of who you'd expect him to be. He's one of the worst, but not the worst quarterback in any given year in passer rating under pressure, and one of the worst, but not the worst quarterback in any given year in passer rating in a clean pocket. He's a backup, fine. But if you keep a clean pocket, that's still a passer rating of like 89. So the more you can help someone like that, who's clearly not going to win the game on his own, the more you can take advantage of somebody who he has some skills that you can use. For the most part, he's a fairly aggressive quarterback. You've got a good cast of skill players that can take advantage of that aggression. He is somewhat accurate in short to intermediate range. That's the sort of stuff that you can take advantage of in a situation where he's got enough time to make those decisions. But the Vikings allowed him to be under pressure far too often, and so he was more of that quarterback who has a passer rating of like 38 under pressure than the quarterback who has a passer rating of 89 without pressure. It's not surprising what happened, and you could blame him because he played poorly, obviously. But that's not unexpected. It is unexpected how abysmally the Vikings offensive line played. And so I want to hold them to a greater account because it's not that they were more responsible, it's that they didn't play up to their expectations while Case Keenum did.
There was just collapsing all the way around. And things that you saw last week, you did not see this week. Like, it was Dalvin Cook wasn't catching the runner. Or blitzes were getting in that didn't seem to be getting in the Saints game, that sort of thing. And when he had time, there were a few Keenum moments that were good. A couple of times he was bailed out by receivers, or he had just enough time to be able to throw something over to, say, Stephon Diggs and make a miraculous catch. But the Vikings' offensive line did not put him in a position to be successful, I felt.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that. And what's really frustrating is that even in those rare moments, penalties kind of took them away. The one on Stephon Diggs, I would argue, is not a very good penalty to call. I thought that was a really poor decision by the referee. And, like, there are other penalties where I thought, like, for example, the Trae Waynes penalty, I thought that wasn't a fair penalty to call. But it's just like it adds to the frustration, and there's so few opportunities for Keenum to be able to make that play. And there are times when he stepped up into the pocket, created some room for himself, and threw a strike downfield that was, like, largely accurate or whatever. But yeah, I think that, he had times where he played well. And the offensive line and the protection unit overall, including Dalvin Cook, didn't give him as many of those opportunities as he needed in order for the Vikings to succeed.
Oh, totally fair. Let's talk a little bit about the defense. Actually, before we talk about the defense, can we give a quick shout out to our unexpected hero for the Vikings, C.J. Ham, with his 1 yard, 1 touchdown performance? That man's doing quite well for himself.
Yeah, he's got a 100% touchdown rate.
That's pretty good. We went ham on him. That was excellent. Also, just in case you decided to put the money down in Vegas, Laquan Treadwell did outgain Stephon Diggs in this game. So if you did bet on that, please enjoy your many returns. Also, you're an insane person for even considering betting something like that.
You monster.
What is wrong with you? Kyle Rudolph, Adam Thielen, sure. Laquan Treadwell, tripling his number of catches for a year? No. Yeah, the defense, boy, we asked a lot of them this game. We asked them to keep it close, and they tried. And Xavier Rhodes had a pretty good game against Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I think so. So there's like one kind of note about that's fairly important, which is that penalty that he gave up pretty early on. But when he was covering Xavier Rhodes, he only allowed 3 catches on 8 targets for 28 yards. And Antonio Brown overall didn't have a very good game. I mean, I forgot what I set the over-under at. I think his career or his average over the last 3 years is something like 104 yards per game. And I was like, the over-under is probably around 80. And it seems like he cut less than that. So just overall, that was fine. The only issue, of course, is that Xavier Rhodes was a little bit injured, and so Antonio Brown had opportunities against Trae Waynes and Terrence Newman, etc. But yeah, no, Xavier Rhodes did a really, really good job shutting down Antonio Brown, aside from a deep defensive pass interference play that, had Xavier Rhodes not interfered with, probably would have been a completion. It was a pretty clear call. I saw some people in a couple of comments threads call it ticky-tacky. No, it was pretty clear. That sucks. He might have saved a touchdown by doing that, so it might have actually been a positive play. But honestly, he had a stellar performance against the best or second best receiver in the NFL, with one big mistake that, obviously it impacted the outcome of the game. But even if you add that to his total, he still kept Antonio Brown well below his career, receiving yardage. So, he did really well in that game, even though that penalty was a big one.
Yeah, he ended up with 62 yards total for the game. So that's if you include the penalty, that's not great. But ignoring the penalty for just a moment, and if he did end up saving the touchdown, that's quite the good day for him. There were a few players that stood out in not necessarily positive ways. Brian Robinson, for one. Can we talk a little bit about Brian Robinson and what he was on Sunday?
Robinson actually did well, again, aside from the penalty, and that penalty was huge. I am getting a little bit annoyed at how people are blaming that entire drive on Brian Robinson. Like, yeah, of course, if he had not committed that penalty, the Vikings, I mean, the Steelers probably wouldn't have run a play at all, and the Vikings would have been able to force a punt, and it wouldn't have led. I mean, that was a touchdown drive. But it's not like Brian Robinson allowed the touchdown. Multiple people failed on that drive. It just so happened that Robinson gave them the opportunity to fail, and so I think he's getting too much blame for the 7 points on that drive, and not enough credit, actually, for how well he played over the course of the game. He did a really good job stuffing the run. He did a pretty decent job creating pressure. The stuff you expect from your second defensive end, except he was the third defensive end. So, some really good stuff from him. Of course, this game is going to be remembered for, I don't think it was offside. I think it was encroachment. That revived the drive.
Yeah, it was an odd. It just seemed, for somebody who's a veteran, it just seemed odd that of all people that he jumped on it. Like, and there's times that you just sit there and just go, don't jump, don't move on it. They're just waiting to take the time. They're just waiting to see if somebody jumps. They're just waiting to see if somebody's going to move on it. They're not actually going to snap this on fourth down, sort of thing. And God, we got bit on one of those too. It was ridiculous. As far as the defense is concerned, it seemed like they were out there far longer than we should have been asking them to do. Looking at time of possession, it was almost 10 minutes difference. The Steelers had over 34 minutes, and we were at 25. So this was a beaten down squad by the end of the game. You could tell, like, even when we were trying to come back in the third quarter, man, we started to see some hands on knees just like gasping for air around the beginning of the fourth quarter. Like, it just seemed like we were not going to be able to come back offensively, and defensively we're not going to be able to keep holding them to 20 points.
Yeah, and honestly, it's one of the best offenses in the NFL, and despite the fact that they were clearly gassed in the second half, I mean, holding Antonio Brown to 62 yards, holding Le'Veon Bell to under 4 yards a carry, that's pretty stellar work. But I think that it did end up contributing to some of the longer drives that Pittsburgh had. And Pittsburgh is trying to, at that point, drain the clock because they have a lead and they don't want the Vikings to have an opportunity to come back. Although I do think there was this one moment where, and of course, it was a moment that was created by penalty, where Pittsburgh punted the ball and landed it like inside the 5. Or no, it was Pittsburgh was going to kick a field goal, and then I think one of their dudes committed a false start, so they moved 5 yards back, and then punted the ball and then landed it inside the 5. But the Vikings had committed a penalty. Might have been Anthony Barr by I don't think it was roughing the kicker. It was the other penalty that also is the same penalty.
The running into, yeah, it was the flag, yeah.
Yeah. And that would have advanced them 5 yards where they were going to kick that field goal. I don't know why, because that would have moved the game from 11 points into 14. I have no idea why they didn't do that. That was kind of weird. But, whatever. For the most part, Pittsburgh was clearly playing to hold on to a lead, so they took their time, despite being a super explosive offense, and they were taking advantage of how tired the defense was by, staying at the line of scrimmage and making sure that the defense had to constantly be kind of primed to play at any moment, which is itself tiring. It really dragged things down, and a lot of that has to do with, of course, how the offense didn't have the ability to consistently move the chains. And that's, kind of despite the fact that I think Dalvin Cook had just like a workmanlike game as a runner. He was just phenomenal as a runner. But that wasn't enough to make up for the pressure given up and just the general lack of talent at the quarterback position that the Vikings had to deal with.
And, of course, we get to talk about the extra point that Kai Forbath doesn't seem to like to make.
Perfect on field goals.
Boy,
he's like 5 extra points for the Vikings or something like that.
He's so good on field goals. If only he was better at shorter field goals that are only worth 1 point, then we would be solid.
It's just so weird. That has to be a thing where he gets into a headspace specifically about extra points. There's no other explanation for it.
You were brought here for your extra points, not your field goals, damn it. You were here for your extra points.
Just so weird.
So, do we open up a discussion about Kai Forbath for a moment and say, do you believe this is form? Do you feel like this is Holder? Where are we at?
I think for the moment, you maybe let him fail a little bit longer before you open up this discussion. It's so difficult to find kickers. I forget who the Chargers released in order to hold on to Younghoe Koo. Maybe that guy's available. Maybe that guy's, good. But for the most part, it doesn't seem like there's really available kickers. So for now, you just kind of stick with it and hope that he can get better. And there's only one player that I think right now there's a pretty good open discussion about replacing, and that's Trae Waynes, because he's just played so poorly.
Well, let's talk about Trae Waynes then. He got benched partway through the was it third quarter, or was it in the early fourth that he ended up finding himself on the pine?
Well, that's actually really difficult to figure out because there was a heavy cornerback rotation, and so he could have just been on the bench as a matter of course in order to see more time with Terrence Newman out there. But it did occur immediately after he gave up a big play. And I believe it was the play where he was 10 yards in off coverage on 2nd and 22. And the deep pass was still completed over his head. I have no idea how someone with 4.31 speed, who's played cornerback all his life, and is in 10 yards of off coverage, gets burned on just a simple go route. But that's what happened. And I believe that's the play that ended up getting him benched. I'm not confident in that. He might have been replacing Rhodes on that play, but he did definitely give up a big play right before getting benched / happening to find himself on the bench. There's clearly an open discussion about it.
We're not saying he was punished for what he did. We are saying he should have been punished for what he did.
He knows what he did.
He knows what he did. Just rub his nose in it; it'll be fine. Yeah, that there have been some Vikings Twitter is odd enough when it comes for demanding people's heads, but boy, Trae Waynes was on the fingertips of a lot of people this week as far as a person they wanted to blame for the game. Nobody necessarily wanted to blame that on the offensive line. Nobody wanted to blame the quarterback, but they wanted to blame Trae Waynes, and they wanted to blame the offensive line. Who do you point the finger to as far as why we ended up losing this game?
I think it's primarily the offensive line because there's a winnable strategy there, I think, if the offensive line can hold up. But it does need to be said, over the past 2 weeks, Trae Waynes has allowed the worst passer rating in the NFL when targeted. And per snap in coverage, he's the third worst in yards given up per snap in coverage. He gets targeted fairly often, in part because Xavier Rhodes is quite good, but on the other hand, he is covering the top receiver, so he should get targeted more often. But Waynes, there's such a big talent differential between Waynes and the receiver that he's up against that it's just kind of such a feast. That's how Martavis Bryant, in part, got 93 yards. Terrence Newman, of course, was also playing a pretty big role in allowing Bryant to get all those yards. So I would argue that the offensive line was primary because you can craft a plan kind of around an offensive line that you expect to do a little bit better. But it should be noted that, Waynes was having such a difficult time. And remember, this passer rating and yards given up stuff, that doesn't include penalties. And in fairness, that last penalty that he committed got declined, which, again, I don't think he committed a penalty, so it doesn't really matter. But it is it's so worrisome. And I think that this is kind of what I was worried about entering the season. I talked about how the defensive line looks better than ever. It might be the best defensive line in the league. Xavier Rhodes, he's probably a little bit better than he was last year. Harrison Smith, he's probably better than he was last year. Both playing extremely well. Anthony Barr is a lot better. Eric Hendricks is playing at the top of his game. This defense should be good, and I was worried. But a lot of times defenses are only as weak or only as strong as their weakest link. And with Mackenzie Alexander, I was concerned about him and how they would target him all the time. Turns out, so far, not a big concern. and Trae Waynes I was concerned about. And that fear is turning out to be true. And that defense is now simply just not as good as a result of the massive talent disparity that's occurring at the outside quarterback position.
Here's a stat that seems a little odd to me, especially after all that we went through last year with our defense being really, really good. We have 3 sacks in 2 games. Is this an odd stat, or do you feel like this is something else?
I assume you mean, 3 total sacks. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like a thing. Like, I think it's like a statistical variance thing. It'll catch back up.
It'll catch back up when we're playing the Bears twice? Or apparently you can just sack Aaron Rodgers at will.
Yeah, I mean, evidently you can just sack Aaron Rodgers at will. Deshaun Kaiser just kind of hands out free sacks, and they're gonna.
How nice of him.
Yeah, it's very, very convenient.
Andy Dalton doesn't believe in completing passes anymore, so you can just run up and get him.
Right. So, there's a couple of opportunities this year to ramp up that sack total. But I mean, they're getting a lot of pressure, and a lot of those pressures are turning into hits. So I assume those sacks will reveal themselves in due time.
They will follow suit. Before we go to the mailbag, couple things about the league in general that I just wanted to kind of update our fans on in case you haven't been paying attention. As it turns out, Matt Khalil is not the savior they're paying him to be in Carolina. Boy,
I don't know.
Cam's looking rough.
That's I don't know who could have seen that coming. Just out of nowhere.
Certainly would not be us or anybody who's watched Matt Khalil over the past 2.5 seasons.
Yeah, I remember during the offseason I was invited onto a Panthers podcast, and this guy just sounded exasperated. He was like, Arif, please explain to all these Panthers fans that are so angry at me for saying Matt Khalil was a bad signing. And I was like, really? This is like a point of contention? Like, okay, yeah, I'll talk about why Matt Khalil was bad at stuff.
Wait, is this fan base just not a believer in facts? They're just a believer in like beliefs? Because we have a bunch of statistics that will prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt. We have game film that will prove to you without a shadow of a doubt that he is a human turnstile.
Well, I mean, like whenever you sign a player that underperformed in their final year, which, I mean, Matt Khalil did that, but also underperformed in his 3 prior years to that. People always point to like the 1 or 2 or 3 good years that they had and how this coaching staff or something unique to this team, in this case, Ryan Khalil, his brother, will be able to bring out the talent that we know that he has because friggin' 5 years ago, he was an alternate Pro Bowler. Like, I guess, I can like see how you can delude yourself into that, but I feel like if it's a 1-year thing, like, yeah, you can make the argument. Like, that was my argument with Mike Remmers. Like, I mean, he was really only bad for 1 year, plus the Super Bowl, which I guess that's an important game. But, you move him back to his regular position, like that, and that's fine. You can, like, argue it, and maybe you're going to be wrong about that argument, like I was. But I feel like you just really cannot make an intellectually honest argument that Matt Khalil signing made sense.
No.
I guess he was an upgrade over to, like, Michael Oher, and in this case, Mike Remmers at left tackle, which that's where he was.
Was he really an upgrade, though?
I guess not.
For all of those fantasy owners that have Cam, he is going to be playing against New Orleans, and the last 2 players to play against New Orleans became like players of the week. So just look out for that for your play.
In fairness, New Orleans had to play Tom Brady, and then the next week, Tom Brady. So.
That's right. I forgot that they're the only team in the league that had to play Tom Brady twice in a row. Tom Brady Bradford. Speaking of Bradford, the draw play comic.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
week,
my gosh.
Highly recommended. We've retweeted it.
We'll link that in the show notes. It's so good.
We need another bucket. That's all I'm saying. we need another bucket. Oh, so funny. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go to the mailbag is that pass that Carson Wentz threw that bounced off of a
Oh my God. This pass will haunt me for the rest of my life.
So, did you get that tweeted to you a few dozen times this weekend?
Yeah, yes. And the thing is, I actually, even though I was watching the Vikings game, I did actually get to see that one live because I was like switching. And it wasn't even like I wanted to see the Eagles game. I was just like, what else is on, just real quick. And I saw that, and I was just like, man, you friggin' really? And of course, like I saw like Eagles fans being like 60 yards to 60 yards, and it's like, man, screw you forever. Man.
I'm just imagining that being the text to Ben Natan.
For those who don't know, and you will, of course, include a GIF in the show notes, Carson Wentz threw a picture-perfect interception, just right to the cornerback. It was beautiful. It was like he's the intended receiver.
Matt Schaub would have been proud.
Yeah, exactly. And like, even though it was a deep interception, there was clearly a lane that could have made it a pick six. I mean, it was gorgeous, right? It was everything that I like needed from Carson Wentz, who's, by the way, thrown more turnover-worthy, or has had more turnover-worthy plays than any other quarterback in the NFL, according to PFF. So eat it. But he throws this just gorgeous interception. It was meant for the Chiefs. And
is this one of those situations where like this was stolen from the Red God, and the Red God is going to demand an interception from Carson Wentz next week? Is that where we're at?
I think it's exactly where we're at. And so this friggin' idiot with stone hands, so I guess that's why he doesn't play receiver or whatever. It bounces. It doesn't just like bounce off his hands. It bounces off of like the numbers on his jersey, because like I said, it was perfect. It bounces off the numbers on his jersey, and Zach Ertz, friggin' volleyball player, whatever that he is, perfectly spots this bounce and just plucks it out of the air as if that was intended for him the whole time.
This was Madden. This was Madden physics at its best. Yeah. Like even Madden like physics would look at it and just go, no, that gets picked.
I was so upset.
Even on rookie, this gets picked.
It was like.
Well, I'm watching it. I'm watching it in a Buffalo Wild Wings. My brother and I ended up going out to Wild Wings to watch the game, and we are in the middle of Wentz territory, up in North Dakota.
Right. Yeah.
As I've mentioned many times on the show, and so there's all these people in Eagles jerseys, and so you got the two big games up on the screen. The one on the left is the Vikings game, and the one on the right is the Eagles game, of course. And we got to see that play live, and the place just freaks out at the play, just loses their collective minds. It's like, oh God. My only thought is, I do not envy Arif's Twitter timeline right now. I do not envy his mentions.
Brutal. It was brutal.
God.
And it's like I've been trolling Eagles fans like all year. I get it. Like I've asked for this, right? But like that doesn't make it hurt less knowing that I deserve it.
Well, at least you know that you deserve it. This would be a far different discussion if you didn't, have some sort of, I don't know. If you like had some sort of cognitive dissonance here, like, no, I don't understand. Why are they still tweeting positive things about Carson Wentz? Don't they know I don't like him? Don't they know? Don't they know
this
that
does nothing for me? Why would they do this?
This isn't. They know I don't like him. They know I don't like his throwing style. They know I think he's a terrible quarter. Why do they keep sending me things? I don't. At that point,
frankly, I think this is getting mean-spirited.
At this point, yeah, you turn into Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory the first few seasons. Like, why is this happening? I don't understand people. Why are they? Fine. So, let's go to the mailbag. First question is from Candace Hare, who asks, after the penalties and O-line, what, in your opinion, was the next biggest contributor to the loss? I'm going with overly conservative play calling.
I'm going to go, well, Candace is a pretty good follow if you're into, like, horse racing and stuff. I am so lost when it comes to horses. But follow Candace. I forgot her handle. It's like C Hair something. But it's but you can spell her name in Twitter. It's CAND, I think, ICE instead of ACE. So you should be able to find her, HARE. So if you're into horses and horse racing, follow Candace Hair. Second, I definitely understand that the conservative play calling plays a pretty significant role because the Vikings were constantly behind the chains and they threw a lot on third and long. Some of that has to do with penalties, but a lot of it has to do with the minimal gains that they had on first and second down. But I don't think that was sort of the primary cause outside of the offensive line and the penalties, in part because I think the offensive line dictated that play calling. And so I don't know if you can say, it was one or the other, because I think they're kind of interrelated, because the more aggressive play calling you're gonna try and fashion, the more your offensive line has to do, whether it's, get out ahead of bold or aggressive screenplays, engage in difficult trap style runs, or throw deep. You need your offensive line to do a little bit more than they typically do on a passing play on those plays. And I think that there are instances where they did try to be aggressive and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. The bigger issue to me is that it wasn't, I do want to blame, the offensive line and penalties first, but, the third thing is you could have had a complete defensive performance if either Trae Waynes or Terrence Newman had stepped up and just played a pretty good cornerback number 2 game. A lot of people see a cornerback number 2 struggle and they'll say, hey, he's the second cornerback. He's not as good. That's just going to happen sometimes. And I get that. Like, you don't want to dog a player too much for not being, like, literally the best player. But he's actually, right now, literally the worst player. Well, the third worst, according to various statistical, like, references and stuff like that. And
I'm reminded of a Bomani Jones video where he declared
the
people you hate.
I'm going to put that in the show notes.
The people you hate on your football team. Number 1 was like the quarterback that's great, except for he's got that one thing that he does that drives you nuts, whether it be interceptions or just dumb crap. And
just dumb shit. Yeah.
And then like number 2 on his list was the number 2 cornerback. Because there's a reason he's number 2 and not number 1. Ask any football player, ask any football like fan, and he will tell you his least favorite player is the number 2 cornerback.
Because what's going to happen. One day he's going to be the number 1 cornerback, and
we're going to go. Oh,
and he's going to line up across Calvin Johnson and be like, "Oh no, I'm Antonio Cromartie."
I've got too many kids to worry about playing against Calvin Johnson. Antonio Cromartie, the man that vasectomies forgot.
Twice, evidently.
I thought it was 3 times since the vasectomy. Dude, get that checked. That's not cool. But anyway... Yeah, I think...
In an alternate universe, he's some sort of superhero. I'm just going to put that out
there. Even Sean Kemp is like, dude, just bag it. Just call it good. Speaking of, let's go into a question from Don from Ohio who asks, would benching Waynes for Brock only worsen Trae's confidence, or would it turn on a switch? Is Waynes done?
I have no idea. Different players respond to different things. So one good example is actually Mike Zimmer was talking about how long it took for him to kind of figure out Xavier Rhodes and how, because, Mike Zimmer's kind of known for like this overbearing, demand excellence at all times, make fun of like players who play poorly, whatever, right? Of being particularly harsh.
Kill those stuffed animals.
Right, exactly. And I think that's his like default, but he does adjust his coaching style to individual players, and he understood that Xavier Rhodes doesn't really respond to that and responds to, different types of coaching a little bit better. And of course, obviously, he's done a very good job with Xavier Rhodes, and he's going to have to figure out what that is for Trae Waynes. If I were like forced to guess, and it's a mailbag, so obviously I've got a gun to my head and I have to make a decision. If I were forced to guess, I would think that Trae Waynes would probably not respond well to benching, but he's clearly not responding well to playing. So that's kind of your only option at that point. I mean, like, there's like, shades of that, right? And the Vikings are actually currently engaging in one of those not quite benching, not quite starting, like scenarios. But I think for the most part, you're just better off without him on the field right now.
Yeah, you're better off with him getting the donuts on Saturday than you are anything else. Like, you just you make him get the donuts for Donut Club, and just tell him you're doing this because you're not doing a very good job playing football. And if you crash the car on the way back with the donuts, then you're probably benched.
Yeah, we can get Nate Burleson here to crash cars, man.
You are more replaceable than you think, son. Don from Ohio would also like to ask, how long will it take Arif to recover from his devastating loss to me in fantasy football? Never is the most likely answer, correct?
I'll keep this short because people hate hearing about other people's fantasy teams. A, never, correct. B, I just want to explain this a little bit. Again, I know people hate hearing about fantasy, but we both had 69 #nice points against each other going into Monday night. He had slightly more, either like 69.22, I had 69.12. And he had a player to play and I didn't. So I had already lost by then. But I was like, hey, maybe Kenny Golladay will like fumble and I'll be back in the lead, right? And Kenny Golladay didn't even have the wherewithal to have a good game. He had 0.8. It was like the most rub it in your face, meaningless points. And I wanted to complain about this on Twitter, but I had no way of wording this like on Twitter that would make sense. So I'm reserving it for this podcast.
You preferred not to go off on like a Twitter thread about how much you hate the former hoodie and the stupidness of the stupidity of like the 0.08 points that he ended up getting and all that.
Right, like it's difficult to explain like why it's so demeaning for Kenny Golladay to just eke out this already barely win with nothing. Like I would have rather Kenny Golladay had got like 3 touchdowns, and I wouldn't have stood a chance anyway. Okay, fine, but no, thanks, dude.
So before we go any further into the mailbag, just a quick note that we have had a few hits in the negative 25-point category. Let's pull up the image here real quick. The kickers who have missed this year include Kai Forbath, who no one has picked up, and for good reason. He has a negative 34 points in the league. Adam Vinatieri just has the negative 14 points. Caleb Sturgis, who no one has, is negative 12. He is also on IR. Nick Folk for Tampa Bay has negative 11. The team of Gino 911 had Blair Walsh. I declared, I said, no. Who's gonna be brave enough to pick up Blair Walsh? I think I challenged people on the podcast. Who's gonna people
on the podcast and in the chat room
and in the chat during the draft? Who's gonna get him? Negative 9 points right now. Jason Myers negative 8, and Steven Gostkowski was the surprise with negative 4, and he is also picked up. So we have had a few hits. And
so my strategy in this league, looking at kickers, was to take a look at how many people had missed extra points over the past 2 years. And only 2 people were perfect. Justin Tucker and Steven Gostkowski. Sorry, dude. You made the right pick. Doesn't matter. This league is terrible. I love it.
It's the most beautiful thing I've ever brought to this podcast. I feel like I'm responsible for 2 things about the podcast. The inclusion of the Loch Ness Monster, and of course, the Norse Code Fantasy League. Everything else can go die in a fire. These are the 2 things that I am the most proud of as far as this show is concerned. So, moving on. Next question is from Zen Cupid, who asks, how often were the pressure issues on offense due to the O-line versus Keenum holding the ball too long or bailing on a relatively okay pocket?
The pressure arrived really quickly. I think Keenum could have managed the pressure that did arrive a lot better. Like I had mentioned, he'd floated into pressure a little bit too often. He didn't step up into open space. But that is just, those are strategies that quarterbacks have to mitigate the impact that pressure has. I don't think Keenum very often, occasionally, but I don't think he very often held on to the ball too long and invited that pressure himself. A lot of that pressure was caused the offensive lineman not blocking the defender in front of them appropriately, or the running back, or occasionally the tight end. But for the most part, the pressure arrived not because Keenum held onto the ball too long, but he didn't deal with that pressure once it had arrived appropriately. It does make sense to ask about his role in pressure, though. It's not like a bad question or anything.
No, definitely not. It did seem like it was two different quarterbacks playing out there when he had protection and when he didn't. Because when he did have protection on that 2-minute drill, he looked fantastic. It was like, oh, hey, this is the team that I remember from week 1. Like, you guys can actually move the ball. And then you made it across the 50, and then all of a sudden the defense is like, oh, that's right, we can blitz. I forgot.
Oh, man.
Oh, I forgot we can blitz. And then that ended the drive right there.
Welp.
Yeah, end of that. Next question from Matt McKeon, who asks, given the missed extra points, should Zimmer A, change kickers, B, go for 2 all the time, C, anyway, stick with Kai and hope, or D, join your fantasy league?
I think he would understand a little bit more about how to select kickers if he had joined our fantasy league. So obviously, that's the primary option, D. But aside from that, I think you should go for 2 a lot. Not all the time. Situationally, it may be more appropriate to kick it, but
just enough to put it into Kai Forbath's craw, just a little bit, just into his head a little bit, that we're doing this because we can't trust you. Remember,
we're still going to kick some extra points if we score more touchdowns, but only if.
Yeah. Next question is from Austin, who asks, what is the maximum amount of consecutively consumed turkey dinners you'd trade for a Vikings Super Bowl win?
So I saw this question on my feed. I've been thinking about it, and I want to say the parameters aren't clear enough, because if I get to cook the turkey dinners, I can create stuff that is acceptable. Again, my issue with turkey is that it is the least of all proteins, not that it is always 100% going to be a bad experience. It's just if you'd substituted a different protein, you'd have a better time 100% of the time. So, I can make turkey, almost meatballs on one night. I can, make a decent sort of cranberry sauce salad on another night. I can spatchcock a turkey for a decent dinner on another night. So it's not as if I couldn't stand it. But, I mean, the monotony would probably kill me around day 10. I'm not that, stalwart individual when it comes to food. I mean, I am, because, I visit Bangladesh and, I eat a bunch of really bad food that will actually kill you. But, also I'm not.
I like how that's part of the explanation. Well, I eat dangerous foods abroad, so I can handle my stuff. But, yeah, day 10.
But if it's boring and tastes bad, I'm out. It's got gut microbes that will make you expel all of the food products that you've eaten for the past week. Yeah, I can handle that for a while. But it tastes boring? You're
just not a stovetop fan. You're just not going to be able to handle that. Okay. I'm thinking between 10 and 15 because my turkey takes aren't as hot as yours. I don't actually have a big problem with it. I think it's funny that your big problem with turkey isn't necessarily that it's bad, it's just that everything else is better.
Right, and we valorized it in a holiday. That's why my turkey takes have to come out so hot, to resist
They
idiocy.
They take 12 hours in the oven. He spends lots and lots of time just marinating them, just getting a little bit of liquid on the crust, just making sure she's not going to be too dry. This is a hot turkey take. Jackass. Yeah, I get it. But I feel like between 10 and 15 I could handle, but yeah, it would get rough pretty quickly. I have a feeling I would have the same reaction to that afterwards that I have with ramen now, or even if I smell the packet, I just instantly go, oh, poverty. Oh, there's college.
So I can understand that for the Maruchan packet ramen, but is that also true when it comes to going to a ramen restaurant? Because That stuff is like next level real good.
Well, no. It's just the cup of noodle stuff, or it's just the like whatever the brand you would
25-second square pouch. Yeah.
Like that's right up there with gin for me. Like if I smell it, then I'm done. I cannot continue. I cannot go on. College destroyed that for me. Like I can't more so gin than ramen, but still, like there are certain things in your life that you end up with a mild form of PTSD from. Mine was mine was Easy Mac, gin, and ramen.
I don't know how Easy Mac got to be so much worse than just like box mac and cheese, but it's so much worse.
I was drunk enough to like mess up the creation of Easy Mac once.
Oh my god!
I reached a level of drunk in my pre-college years that I didn't think was possible. It was right up there with people who like proceed to make a pizza and fall asleep in the it was like that, but I was awake for it. Like oh god, I think I accidentally put soap in it too. Like it went wrong.
Oh god. Okay, yeah, it's be drunk. I had my best friend in college. Was also my debate partner. He was like perpetually poor, which is like weird. I mean, I was not like Mr. Moneybags in college either, but I thought it was weird because we had the exact same job with the same pay. And so we were debate coaches for the same school. So like, I don't know how he ended up poor all the time. But he would constantly end up, having to eat ramen or whatever. And he was like fine with that, except he like needed to make it just like different. And like the ways he made it different were very like puke worthy. Like sometimes he wouldn't boil it and he would eat it, which is like, I get it. That's like a snack. I remember doing that when I was in high school or whatever. But then he would like put peanut butter on it because he's like, yeah, it's a complete protein that way. And I'm just like, man, screw you. That's disgusting.
Like you're just using words you heard Alton Brown say to justify you putting peanut butter in ramen.
Yeah, like what do you do? It's not like peanuts. It's not like a Thai peanut sauce. You're just bad.
I had one of my best friends in college we'd be sitting around the lounge and he would bring soup in for lunch, which, okay, soup, whatever, he's got it in a can. He wouldn't cook it. He wouldn't put it in the microwave. He would just be eating cold soup from with a spoon in front of people in civilized society, no less.
Oh, that's so slimy. Oh man,
chicken noodle
college
just
is
like
the worst.
Yeah.
Any of I know we have a significant like listenership that's currently in college. Stop going to college. It's ruining you.
But
don't stay in school, kids. Norse Code.
If they do that, then my money dries up because I need the college kids to continue to go to school, and like the loan companies, like a huge financial crisis. Like if people start paying attention and actually doing the things we're suggesting, then I'm out of a job, the country crashes, like you and Ben Natan have nothing to complain about. Like it's all going down.
It's dogs and cats living together. Fair. Fair. Some of you stay in college. You're sacrificial lambs so that James can keep a job. The other ones have to leave. I'll let you all sort out who is who.
I appreciate that. I've got a family to feed. I got a kid who wakes up during terrible thunderstorms. Next question is from let's go with Ben Glazeman, sure. Who asks, is the Case Keenum 13-step drop a new offensive tool or just an expression of a newly arrived apocalypse?
I like to think that it's like artistic, like he's finally able to paint the tapestry of who he is as a person through the art of football. And for him, that's a 13-step drop. It's like he's the Jackson Pollock of drifting into pressure.
That sounds about right. Justin King asks, seriously, WTF is Avante Collins? Aviante?
I think it's actually Avion, but I mean, no one's really going to correct you. So.
Yeah, sure. Collins, what is he still doing on the roster?
Not sure. That's a great question.
And
I don't have anything to add to that.
silence.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Silence. There is, in terms of money, we have no money. Like, there's no real like answer as to what Collins is doing on the roster. You know, they have like placeholders and lines for iPhones and like new Androids. Perhaps this is a placeholder.
Yeah, placeholder for somewhat talented offensive linemen.
That's great. Next question. Matt Beckendorf asks, Vikings defense had 6 turnovers in the first 2 games last year, 0 this year. Is the lack of turnovers by the defense concerning?
I think it might actually be pronounced Matt Beckendorf, and, whatever. I'm sorry, dude. One of us got it wrong. We'll see. But, yeah, I'm not that concerned about the turnovers. I mean, it's Ben Roethlisberger and Drew Brees. Them not throwing interceptions to even a good defense is not enormously concerning, especially because they've been able to hold down 2 very, very good offenses to significantly below average points. So that's not a huge concern for me. Le'Veon Bell is not particularly fumble prone. Mark Ingram is not particularly fumble prone. Adrian is, but he only had 6 carries. So, not being able to force a turnover, not that concerning. We saw a couple of instances where the defense almost got a turnover. In other situations, it would be a turnover. I think Harrison Smith was really close once, Xavier Rhodes was really close once, and that was a result of pressure. So I'm not concerned. Those turnovers will come. The process by which those turnovers are supposed to happen is happening.
Next question is from Matt in Wisconsin, who asks, it seems like Mac played well. Should he start taking snaps from Waynes?
I think so. I'm kind of surprised at how well Mac is doing. I think everyone is. He's only been targeted once over the past 2 games, and he hasn't taken like 80 snaps or anything like that. But that target was an incompletion, and it was an end zone target too. So more power to him to preventing that from happening. We haven't heard his name, kind of like an offensive lineman. A lot of times, that signals maybe not amazing play because those cornerbacks tend to get interceptions and stuff, but. Pretty good play from a guy that you expected to kind of be burned all the time. It doesn't look like he's making significant mistakes in assignment. And so, and he played on the outside at Clemson. I thought that he was better suited as an outside cornerback, but there's like this height thing in the NFL that you have to go to the slot if you're not 6 feet tall. And I don't think that's the case. Jason Verrett is a really good example. I don't think even Darrelle Revis is 6 feet tall. I think he's 5'11". If he's not, I know there's like other elite corners, right? Chris Harris, Leon Hall. Although Leon Hall did finish in the slot, so maybe not the best example. But I think that, one of the things that Mackenzie Alexander does really well is use the sideline really well. And he can't really do that in the nickel. So I would be okay with experimenting with that for a while, of replacing Waynes with Mac. The next question, of course, is who do you play in the nickel? That could be Terrence Newman. He hasn't been playing well. You're basically trading like poor defense on the outside for poor defense on the inside, which, maybe you'd make that trade. Like, I guess I'd get that. But, Tremaine Brock could end up playing in the nickel, and that could end up being a complete upgrade with Mac on the outside and Brock on the inside, even though you'd kind of think, based off of where they played last year, that they would be in the opposite places.
Next question is from John Belk, who asks, here it is. We haven't gone into the Bradford versus Teddy thing yet, so let's bring up Teddy. Does Bradford getting seriously injured after essentially perfectly protected game, results-wise, more or less guarantee we won't go with him long-term if Teddy looks decent?
I don't think it does guarantee any of that.
Nothing is guaranteed.
Well, yeah, yes.
Not just in a philosophical way. Like nothing is guaranteed in the in football and in the fact that we have 2 reasonably good starters.
Yeah, I think if you were asked, hey, you could have a top 10 quarterback, but he's never going to play a 16-game season. He's only going to play 10 to 14 games. Would you have him on your roster? And I think most general managers would say yes, because it's so difficult to get, top 15, top 10 quarterback. You can find a way around those other games so long as you kind of manage your team appropriately. So I don't think that guarantees that he's not on the roster, especially because this doesn't seem to be, something that, according to Zimmer, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, but according to Zimmer, it's not, going to be week to week to week to week. It's going to be resolved relatively soon, whether or not it's this week or next week. And if that's the case, and Bradford continues to play well, then no, it doesn't guarantee anything, and you're going to have to ask this question at the end of the season on what to do. Which, again, I'm probably going to advocate something, and we still will have no clue because we have no clue if Teddy is who he was. If Teddy is who he was, I would advocate for Teddy. I think people know that, but we have no idea if he's going to return from injury remotely the same. So yeah, it's going to be difficult to figure out, and it's going to be even more difficult to figure out if Bradford keeps on throwing these, and I'm not Bradford. He's not the one throwing wrenches into the situation. It's not like his fault. But if we keep on finding wrenches being thrown into the situation, either through his injury problems or, variable play, like, he plays like Tom Brady one week and he plays like Jared Goff another week. I mean, he probably won't. But, if he plays like Alex Smith another week, and then you're like, well, I don't know, maybe? There's going to be all sorts of, complications to this kind of question.
Yeah. No, totally agree. And it doesn't help that you have... I would refer to it as Teddy Truthers sort of situation where there's rumors coming out that if the Vikings could activate him right now, they would because he's that far ahead in his rehab. Whether or not that's accurate is something that's floating out there too. So nothing is for certain. Nothing is for real. This is all an illusion. We are. There is no such thing as death, and life is just the reflection of our dream. It's a mess. I kind of went off on there at a tangent. Yeah.
Nice. You're right.
In a way, I'm right. In a way, I'm horribly, horribly wrong. Which leads us to our last question, which is also from Don from Ohio, who is neither Don nor from Ohio, who asks if Arif, Dusty, myself, Eric Thompson, and Ted Glover, Purple Buckeye, had to face Pennywise the Clown, who gets killed off first and who survives. Boy, in the listing of the whole, you just have to outrun the slowest person, I would probably end up dying first. I have every belief that I would end up dead.
Yeah, even though I've face planted very visibly publicly on Twitter, I think I could still probably outrun James.
I can. Let's see. I've done 11 miles at work the last 2 days, just leading me to be exhausted. But I would probably end up dying here. Dusty hasn't been keeping up on his. I know for a fact Dusty has not been keeping up on his cardio, so he is suspect, but could still go. I don't know about Eric. Eric, I'm sure, is getting dad bod from the kids. And
he plays intramural soccer. I think he's got the greatest chance of surviving.
Oh, you're right.
Not intramural pickup, whatever.
And Ted is former Air Force, which, I mean,
who knows?
Yeah, that's a variable. But yeah, I would probably be the first one to die. I'd be over by the grate, and he would just mention that there's all-you-can-eat ribs down there, and I go, okay, well, that seems reasonable. I can't see that going poorly. It's all-you-can-eat ribs, and you can play anything you want on the jukebox. Sold. We're going through the entire dark side of the moon tonight, boys. Just going through it. Yeah, I'd be screwed. I would die a horrible, horrible death. Which is a great note to end the show on. Fantastic. Arif, do you have anything to plug for us?
Well, by the time this goes live, it's not going to matter because waivers will unlock, but I do have a fantasy waiver wire thing up at purplepdsd.com. Otherwise, I'll have a piece on Dalvin Cook up probably soon after the show posts.
And if you have heard value in the show, if you like what you've heard, you can donate to us in one of two different ways. You can go to paypal.me/Norse Code and give a one-time donation there, or you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code and give a monthly donation there. You can give anywhere between $1 and a whole mess of money. Usually people just do Tree Fitty to keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. We really do appreciate you guys coming through for us this year. We are doing really well for numbers, and please keep it up. Please tell your friends about the show. Please let people know that there's a great little show available that we post on the dailynorseman.com and norsecodepodcast.com as well. So that is going to do it for the show. So for Arif, for Dusty, for myself, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will be back in another couple days with the preview of the Bucs game. So until then, demand excellence. Demand Norse Code.
Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, or wherever else fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, who can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. Our intrepid producer and occasional co-host James Pagachnik can be found on Twitter at Big Mono or curating the official Norse Code Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. I'm your host with a firm grasp of the obvious, Dusty O'Connell, and my name is my handle on Twitter. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, your one-time donation can be made at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Please visit our website, norsecodepodcast.com, where you'll find links to our Facebook and YouTube pages, along with the episode archive and some other good stuff. And any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be emailed
to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. And on behalf of the entire Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.